Many different elements go into creating a compelling story. One of the biggest factors comes down to whether or not your story features dynamic characters. A dynamic character is a figure in a narrative who transforms and evolves over the course of a story. Externally and internally, this character's principles, purpose, and point of view develop through their actions and reactions to the challenges they face. The more dynamic a writer or author can make their characters, the more unique and memorable they will be. Story is drama. Drama is conflict. And the byproduct of conflict is change. If your characters are confronted with the right mixture of conflict and resolution, then the changes they will go through will make for a truly enticing experience for your readers. So pour out those rocks and pull up them socks, because for today's chop, we're looking at how to write dynamic characters. When crafting your stories, it's important to try to reflect some semblance of reality. If the characters aren't relatable, then your story may fail to resonate with the target audience. But if you make them too realistic, it could also lead to a dull narrative, as people in real life don't necessarily evolve and change in specific, perspective-defining scenarios. If we could all have a ghost visit us on one cold winter night to show us the error of our ways, I'm sure we'd all be better people for it.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits!
Haunted? I've already had enough of that.
But life doesn't work that way. Dramatic fiction, on the other hand, absolutely does. Ebenezer Scrooge is a dynamic character not because he starts out as an irritable curmudgeon, it's because we get to witness him realize the consequences that his actions and decisions have on other people. This fantastical experience that Charles Dickens provides to his protagonist in A Christmas Carol transforms Scrooge from a misanthropic cheapskate
humbug
to a philanthropic gentleman.
Merry Christmas.
In just one night. The more a character changes from their starting point, the more dramatic they will feel. But dynamism doesn't necessarily have to come in big, sweeping circumstances. Characters can still be engaging as they develop on a small, more intimate level as well. But before we get into that, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Alright, now let's look at some intimate yet dynamic character changes. While the popular series Breaking Bad shows us how a shy, humble teacher can transform into a murderous drug lord over the course of 5 seasons, not every story needs to take a character on such a metamorphic journey. Depending on the story you're telling, there's still a lot of scope for delivering a dynamic character in a more subtle manner. Without Christmas ghosts or RVs full of meth, Jane Austen managed to deliver one of the most dynamic characters in fiction purely by developing a vibrant, witty, intelligent protagonist in the form of Elizabeth Bennett in Pride and Prejudice. Caught up in the societal games of the time, Elizabeth passes judgment on the men that her mother is pushing her to marry. However, it's through these encounters and entanglements with these characters that Elizabeth realizes the error of her ways. Her stubbornness and misguided notions of other people lead her to make poor decisions. It's only when she confronts this truth about herself that she can grow as a character. Elizabeth still follows the beats of the hero's journey, even though her quest is more focused on internal realizations. And her character remains dynamic because of the growth and maturity that she develops along the way. Is it possible to have a compelling character that does not change? The quick answer is yes. These characters are often called static or steadfast. This means that their journey is to hold on to their resolve and not change their ways despite the external elements pushing them to transform. If we look at Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we'll see that Charlie Bucket doesn't go through a character transformation. Instead, it's his resistance to temptation that propels him through the narrative till he eventually wins the ultimate prize. Now, what does change for Charlie is his external circumstances. The once impoverished child has now become the heir to the Wonka fortune. But the reason he won this is because of his inherent goodness and his reluctance to change. The readers root for Charlie Bucket's success despite his lack of growth. And one of the ways in which static characters remain compelling is by surrounding them with enticement and temptation. The intrigue is watching him remain true to himself while other characters give in and fail around him. Can the antagonist be dynamic? Usually in fiction, the antagonist is a character who attempts to prevent the protagonist from reaching their goal. Since this character's purpose is to be the foil, can they also learn and change along the way? Can a villain be dynamic? Absolutely. Let's break down the difference between a static antagonist and a dynamic antagonist. A static antagonist's point of view doesn't change. Their resolve is steadfast despite the actions of the main character. Scar in The Lion King would be considered a static antagonist. This is a character who is so determined to keep the power he obtained that he perishes in the final defiant defense against Simba. There was no moment of catharsis for this villain. His greed and ambition blinded him until the very end. Meanwhile, cinema's most fearsome villain, Darth Vader, is actually a dynamic antagonist. While he may have started out as the Darth Lord of the Sith in A New Hope, it was his confrontations with Luke Skywalker that led him back to the light and inevitably sacrificed himself for the greater good. How many characters can be dynamic? While stories generally are about change, too much change for too many characters can actually be a bad thing. If every character you introduced in a story was dynamic, then the central thrust of the narrative would get lost in all that noise. It is possible to have multiple dynamic characters running through the same plot. However, try to ensure that their transformations don't hit the same beat and duplicate the same emotion. If Ebenezer Scrooge's underpaid and overworked clerk Bob Cratchit were also to learn the true meaning of Christmas, then Scrooge's lesson wouldn't be as impactful. So instead, Bob Cratchit needs to be static, a character whose resolve acts as a counterbalance to Ebenezer's poor attitude at the beginning. On the other hand, there's evidence that you can stack a story with static characters and still make it engaging. If we inspect the stories of Sherlock Holmes, we'll see that Sherlock and his dear Dr. Watson could both be considered static. While their powers of deduction lead them to solve cases, they don't actually grow as characters throughout their adventures. Even more than that, you could also add Sherlock's formidable foe, Professor Moriarty, to the list of static characters as well, showing that growth and dynamism aren't necessarily universal laws in storytelling. Managing your cast of characters. One of the best ways of ensuring that your characters remain balanced with each other and the overall story is by creating detailed character sheets. By fleshing out their purpose, motivation, and backstory, you'll have a better chance of delivering an engaging, consistent narrative that the reader will love. Not only will this help you with your project, it'll also help you in building your character's bio, which is part of the screenplay promotional kit. Click here for more on that. So the next time you sit down to write, ask yourself this question: is my character going to learn an important lesson by the end of this story? If the answer is yes, then it looks like you have a dynamic character on your hands. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, then click right here and we'll show you how to write exposition in a smooth, compelling way. My name is Chris Brennan. Until next time, keep honing those writing chops.